Chapter 1: Shadows and Light. The town of Shadybrook lay nestled amidst the thick woodlands of Valoria, surrounded by towering pines that whispered ancient secrets. To the untrained eye, it was just another quiet town, where farmers and merchants eked out their lives in relative peace. But beneath its surface, Shadybrook held far more, a rich tapestry of old magic, forgotten wars, and a looming darkness. Long ago, during the time of the Shadow War, Valoria was ravaged by forces that sought to plunge the continent into eternal night. It was an age when the cults of Dismera, the goddess of shadows and forbidden magic, thrived, spreading chaos and despair. Dismera's influence was powerful, her followers numerous. They tapped into dark magics that were banned by the ancient rulers of Valoria, pushing the land to the brink of destruction. Only the intervention of the Order of Light, a sacred alliance of 5 deities, prevented the darkness from consuming all. The Order of Light was the last hope of the people. Led by Aurelia, the goddess of light and purity, they waged a war to counter Dismera's cults. Aurelios, the god of healing, mended the wounded and brought hope. Solara, the goddess of justice, smote Dismera's followers wherever they stood. Thala, the god of nature, restored the balance of life wherever dark magic threatened it, while Lunara, the goddess of wisdom, provided insight to those who sought to unravel Dismera's plans. The war lasted for decades, but eventually, the Order emerged victorious. With their divine powers, they forged artifacts to ensure Dismera's influence would never return. Among these artifacts was the Amulet of Light, imbued with Aurelia's divine essence. The amulet was a beacon, a reminder of hope and protection that held the power to keep Dismera's influence at bay. Shadybrook, the quiet town that had grown in the centuries following the Shadow War, had unknowingly become the resting place of this powerful relic. The townsfolk revered the Temple of Light, never truly understanding the power it guarded. Now, with a dark presence stirring in the land once more, the amulet's protection had grown fragile, and old shadows began to creep back. Chapter 2: Unlikely Encounters. The moon cast a silvery sheen over Shadybrook, its light filtering through the dense canopy of the eastern woodlands. Inside the Wren Tavern, the warm glow from the lanterns created cozy pockets of light amidst the lively chatter and clinking of mugs. The tavern was a sanctuary for weary travelers and locals alike, a place where stories were shared and friendships forged. Garfa's routine. At a secluded corner table near the hearth, Garfa, the sorcerer Earth Genasi, busied himself with his duties. For the past 2 weeks, he had been working as a healer for the town guard, tending to both guardsmen and patrons who sought his expertise. His calm demeanor and analytical mind made him an invaluable asset, though his slightly condescending tone often kept interactions professional and somewhat distant. Garfa methodically organized his healing supplies, his eyes scanning the room for anyone in need. The flickering candlelight reflected off his features, highlighting the intensity with which he approached his work. Thorn's Rest. 2 days ago, Thorn, a young and naive Goliath barbarian, had arrived at the Wren Tavern seeking respite from his recent battles. His towering frame and bruised appearance were a testament to the conflicts he had endured. Despite his injuries, Thorn's goofy grin never wavered, bringing a touch of light-heartedness to the tavern. Tonight, Thorn sat near the bar, his massive hands resting on his knees as he tried to ease the soreness from his latest skirmish. He took slow, deliberate sips from his ale, attempting to relax but still feeling the lingering aches from the battle. Garfa's intervention. Noticing Thorn's discomfort, Garfa glanced up from his book with a mixture of concern and mild annoyance. He rose from his seat and approached Thorn, his tone smooth but edged with a hint of superiority. "You there, Goliath," Garfa said as he approached. "You look like you're in need of some proper healing, rather than just nursing that drink." Thorn looked up, his bruised face breaking into a grin. "Yeah, I guess I could use some help. Who are you?" Garfa gave a curt nod before answering. "I am Garfa, a healer for the town guard. I've been tending to injuries around here for the past 2 weeks. Allow me to help." Garfa produced a small vial and some herbs from his satchel. "Hold still, this might sting a little." Thorn watched with curiosity as Garfa prepared a healing salve, his movements precise and efficient. "Thanks, Garfa. I'm Thorn, by the way," he said, trying to remain still. I've been in town for a couple of days. Got into a bit of trouble. You know how it is. Garfa offered a patronizing chuckle. Indeed, perhaps a more measured approach would serve you better in the future. Rikar's entrance. Just as Garfa was finishing up the salve, the tavern door swung open with a graceful sweep. Rikar, the clever tabaxi artificer, entered with a confident stride, his keen eyes scanning the room for potential opportunities. His whiskers twitched with curiosity as he took in the bustling tavern, and a friendly smile played on his lips. Rikar made his way to the bar, nodding politely to Mira, the tavern owner. "Evening, Mira," Rikar greeted, resting his elbows on the bar. "I'm new in town and looking for some work. Heard Shadybrook might have opportunities for someone with a knack for fixing things. Got anything interesting?" Mira smiled warmly as she poured a drink. "You're in luck. There are always folks around here needing help. The bulletin board outside has a list of tasks. Some require strength, others a bit more finesse. I'd say you'll find something to suit your skills." Overhearing the conversation, Garfa and Thorn, sitting nearby, caught the conversation. Thorn's ears perked up, and he turned to Garfa, his grin widening. "Did you hear that?" Thorn said, excitement evident in his voice. "Sounds like someone else is looking for work too. Let's go see." Garfa sighed but nodded, deciding it was worth investigating. "Very well, Thorn, let's see what this newcomer has to offer." The two of them approached the bar where Rikar was speaking with Mira. "Excuse me," Garfa began, addressing Rikar. "I couldn't help but overhear, you're looking for work?" Rikar turned to face them, his eyes quickly taking in the sight of the Goliath and the Earth Genasi. He smiled, his tail flicking with curiosity. "That's right, name's Rikar, an artificer by trade. I'm always interested in something that lets me tinker and innovate." Thorn extended his massive hand eagerly. "I'm Thorn. I'm kind of new around here too. Been doing some guard work and helping out with whatever needs doing." Garfa gave a polite nod. "And I am Garfa, a healer for the town guard. We were just discussing how there always seems to be something needing attention in Shadybrook." Rikar shook Thorn's hand, the contrast between their sizes almost comical. "Pleasure to meet you both. Sounds like we might be able to help each other out." Leaving the tavern, after a few more moments of conversation, the three decided to head outside and check the bulletin board Mira had mentioned. The night air was crisp as they stepped out of the tavern, the gentle glow of the moon illuminating the cobblestone street. The board stood nearby, covered with various notices and requests for help. Thorn leaned in close to examine the postings, his eyes squinting in concentration. "Let's see, missing cat, help needed with crops, something about repairing a fence." Before they could choose a task, the sound of a commotion nearby caught their attention. A crowd had gathered a short distance away, and the unmistakable voice of Derek Hallow, a town guard, was raised in frustration as he tried to disperse the gathering. "Everyone, clear out. There's nothing more to see here," Derek yelled, his voice tinged with irritation. He waved his arms, attempting to control the restless onlookers. Meeting Derek, Garfa's eyes narrowed in recognition. "That's Derek. He works with the town guard. We should see what's going on. This might be serious." Rikar nodded, curiosity piqued. "Lead the way." The trio made their way over to the crowd, and as they approached, Derek noticed Garfa and his companions. Relief flashed across his face, and he waved them over. "Garfa, I'm glad you're here," Derek said, lowering his voice so only they could hear. "We've got a situation. There's been a murder. We could use all the help we can get." Garfa's expression hardened, and he nodded. "Of course, tell us what you need." Derek gestured for them to follow. "Come with me, I'll let you in to see the scene. Maybe you can find something we've missed." Inside the manor, Derek led them into a nearby manor, where they were confronted by the unsettling sight of Julius von Winkle slumped over a desk in his study, his lifeless eyes staring blankly at the papers before him. The room was dimly lit, the flickering candle casting eerie shadows on the walls. Rikar's keen eyes immediately began scanning the room, taking in every detail. Thorn, however, simply looked bewildered, his usual grin replaced by a more serious expression. "What do we have here?" Rikar murmured, stepping closer to the desk. Garfa pointed to the broken glass on the floor, a small, shattered vial with a faint, pungent odor. "This vial," It looks like it contained something important. Rykar picked up a piece of the broken glass, examining the residue inside. A paralytic potion, perhaps? Something to incapacitate Julius before whatever else happened. Garfa nodded gravely. There's something else. He gestured to a parchment on the desk. The ink smudged as if the writer had been interrupted mid-sentence. Rykar picked it up and read aloud. To whomever finds this, I fear I am running out of time, and I must make this brief. What I have uncovered is alarming and poses a grave threat to our town. There is a presence among us, someone involved in necromancy, practicing dark magic that threatens not only our safety but the very fabric of our community. The extent of their influence is far-reaching, and if their plans come to fruition, it will bring ruin upon us all. I have been gathering evidence. The letter ended abruptly, with a failed stroke of the quill and a small smudge of blood on the parchment. Before they could speculate further, the door to the study opened, and a maid hesitantly stepped in. She looked at the trio and spoke in a soft voice. Do you need anything, sirs? Thorn, ever eager for information, stepped toward her. Actually, yes. Have you seen anyone acting suspiciously around Julius? The maid glanced nervously at the body before answering. Well, his brother Gareth has been visiting him more often than usual lately, and he seemed nervous. And there were some arguments between Julius and Derek about some debt Julius owed. Derek needed the money, and things got heated when Julius said he couldn't pay. The trio exchanged a glance, and Garfa nodded. Thank you, you've been very helpful. Questioning Derek. Leaving the study, the trio found Derek waiting outside. Garfa decided to keep the details of the note to themselves for now. Derek, Garfa began, the maid mentioned you had some disagreements with Julius over a debt. Derek sighed, his face tense. Yeah, we argued. Julius owed me money, and I needed it badly, but it was nothing worth killing over. I would never do that. Rykar studied Derek's face for any sign of deceit, but he found none. Garfa nodded, sensing the sincerity. Very well, but what can you tell us about Julius's brother, Gareth? Derek relaxed slightly. Gareth? He's a good man, but they were both under a lot of stress lately. You can find Gareth near the southern wall. He lives in a small hut there, but I'm telling you, he'd never hurt Julius. They were close to Gareth's house. With Derek seemingly in the clear, the trio decided to visit Gareth. The journey took them to the southern edge of Shadybrook, where Gareth lived in a small, modest hut. The difference between Julius's grand manor and Gareth's humble dwelling was stark, highlighting the difference in their lifestyles. As they approached the house, Rykar signaled to the others. I'll keep watch from outside. He slipped into the small yard to the left of the house, hiding amidst the clothing hanging from lines, his eyes sharp for any sign of trouble. Garfa and Thorn approached the door. Without hesitation, Thorn rammed his shoulder into the door, breaking it down with a loud crash. Inside, Gareth stood up in alarm. What in the blazes? Who are you? Thorn wasted no time, stepping forward with an imposing stance. We have questions, and you're going to answer them, Gareth, he declared. Garfa stepped in front of Thorn, raising his hand and allowing a flicker of arcane energy to dance across his fingers, an unmistakable threat. Talk, Gareth. We know about the arguments, the debts, and Julius's fears. What were you two planning? Gareth swallowed hard, his eyes darting between Thorn and the magic swirling in Garfa's hand. Julius was in debt to Derek. He couldn't pay, and Derek was pressing him, but Julius was trying to protect me. He thought he found something valuable to settle the debt. Garfa's eyes narrowed. What was it, Gareth? What did Julius discover? Gareth hesitated, then finally whispered, it was something about Malika. Julius found out something dangerous. He wanted to keep me safe. Garfa leaned closer. Malika? Who is Malika? Gareth's face turned ashen, and he shook his head. I shouldn't have said that. You don't know what you're getting yourselves into. Thorn's accidental harm. Seeing Gareth's refusal to say anything more, Thorn decided to take matters into his own hands. With his towering frame, he reached down, picked Gareth up effortlessly, and pulled him into a sitting position on the floor. Come on now, Thorn said in his usual naive tone, trying to get a response from Gareth. As he sat down on the floor with Gareth in his lap, he unknowingly applied too much pressure, and a crack echoed through the room. Gareth cried out in pain as his collarbone broke, his face twisted with fear and agony. Thorn's demeanor didn't change, his voice almost apologetic. "Sorry, but you gotta talk, I'm just trying to help, you know." Garfa gave an exasperated sigh, shaking his head at Thorn's unintentional roughness. Realizing that Gareth might need a moment to recover, Garfa decided to start searching the rest of the hut. The house had 3 small rooms, the foyer, a bedroom, and what looked like a makeshift study. The search. Garfa moved into the first room, where he found a small alchemy set on a worn table. The setup included a collection of vials, many of which were similar to the broken one they had found at Julius's study. One vial caught Garfa's attention, a weaker, less effective version of the paralytic potion used on Julius. "Interesting," Garfa muttered, examining the vials carefully. "Seems like Gareth was trying to replicate something here, or maybe he was involved more deeply than he let on." He took a moment to gather some of the vials, tucking them into his satchel as evidence before heading back to the foyer. As Garfa returned, the sight that met his eyes was, to say the least, bizarre. Thorn was sitting cross-legged on the floor, Gareth in his lap, and was petting him gently as if he were a dog. There, you'll be all right," Thorn said soothingly, trying to comfort the clearly terrified Gareth. Garfa raised an eyebrow. "Thorn, what are you doing?" Thorn looked up, his goofy grin showing no sign of malice. "He's scared. Garfa, I think we need to be gentle now. Maybe he'll talk." Garfa shook his head but didn't argue. Before he could respond, Rykar suddenly slipped back into the room, his expression tense. Rykar's sighting. "Something's not right," Rykar said, his eyes darting toward the window. "I saw shadows moving along the wall outside. Someone's out there." Garfa's eyes narrowed as he turned back to Gareth. "Gareth, if you're hiding something, now is the time to tell us. You mentioned Malika. Who is he? Why is he important?" But Gareth remained silent, his lips pressed tightly together, his eyes filled with terror. It was clear that fear of Malika, or of whoever might be watching, kept him from speaking further. Rykar, growing impatient, moved toward Gareth with an edge to his demeanor. "Enough of this." He gave Gareth a hard kick to the chest, knocking him off Thorn's lap and onto the floor. With his foot, he pinned Gareth down, his eyes narrowing. "You're going to tell us everything," Rykar said, his voice cold. "We don't have time for your silence." The breaking point. Gareth's face twisted with pain, and he gasped for breath, but still, he refused to speak. Seeing Gareth's resolve and growing increasingly frustrated, Thorn finally lost what patience he had left. "All right, that's it," Thorn roared, grabbing his axe and standing to his full height. Rykar stepped back, his eyes still on Gareth, and Garfa tried to call out, "Thorn, wait," but it was too late. Thorn's massive form moved with surprising speed, and in one swift motion, he brought his axe down on Gareth's neck. The blow was precise and brutal, severing Gareth's head cleanly from his body. Blood pooled around the lifeless form, and a heavy silence fell over the room, broken only by Thorn's heavy breathing. For a moment, no one spoke. Garfa stared at the scene, his eyes flicking between Thorn and the severed head, trying to process what had just happened. Rykar, meanwhile, looked less shocked and more resigned, as if he had expected it to come to this. Thorn lifted Gareth's head by the hair, examining it briefly before letting out a satisfied grunt. He wasn't going to talk, anyway, might as well take a trophy. He tied a piece of rope around the head and slung it over his shoulder like it was nothing more than a prize won in battle. Garfa sighed deeply, a mix of frustration and disbelief in his eyes. "Thorn, we needed answers, not another enemy to deal with. Now we've lost whatever information Gareth could have given us." Rykar, his tail flicking with agitation, nodded. "But he did mention Malika. That's something. We need to find out who this Malika is and what his connection to all of this is." Aftermath. Garfa rubbed his temples, trying to think. "Let's finish searching the rest of the hut. There may still be something here, something Gareth left behind." The trio moved through the remaining rooms, their search now taking on a new urgency. They knew they were running out of time. Whoever was watching from the shadows could still be out there, and the mention of Malika had only deepened the mystery. Rykar moved to a small chest in the corner of the bedroom and began to search through its contents, finding mostly mundane items, old clothing, a few coins, and a rusted dagger. Garfa, meanwhile, checked the shelves, looking for anything that might offer a clue. As they continued their search, Thorn stood by the door, his eyes occasionally flicking toward Gareth's head, which now lay on the floor beside him. Despite his simple demeanor, even he understood the gravity of what they had done. Riker finally spoke up, his voice breaking the silence. "We need to move quickly. If Gareth was afraid of Malika, then we can bet that whoever, or whatever, he is, won't take kindly to this." Garfa nodded, his expression dark. "Agreed. We need to gather what we can and get out of here. We'll regroup and figure out our next move once we're back in town." Thorn picked up Gareth's head once again, his face grim. "All right. Let's get going then. We've got work to do." With Gareth dead and the knowledge of Malika hanging over them like a dark cloud, the trio knew that they were now in far deeper than they had anticipated. Whatever darkness lay ahead, it was clear that they had taken their first step into a much larger and far more dangerous game. As they left Gareth's hut behind, the shadows of Shadybrook seemed to grow longer, and the chill of the night settled heavily over them. The name Malika echoed in their minds, a name that now held the promise of both danger and revelation. Chapter 3: Into the Depths. After the ordeal at Gareth's hut, the adventurers needed a moment to regroup and rest. They returned to the Wren Tavern, the warmth of its glow providing a welcome refuge from the tension of their recent actions. Mira, the friendly tavern owner, greeted them with a knowing smile as they entered. "You lot look like you could use a drink," she said, her eyes glancing over the trio's weary expressions. Thorn grinned, his bruises still evident but fading. "You have no idea, Mira. A few drinks and some rest, and we'll be as good as new." The group settled at the bar, ordering mugs of ale. Garfa remained quiet, his mind preoccupied with the mention of Malika and what it could mean for the town. Riker, ever observant, seemed more relaxed but kept an eye on the other patrons, watching for any unusual behavior. After finishing their drinks, they each headed to their respective rooms, the exhaustion of the day's events catching up to them. That night, they slept soundly, grateful for the respite. A dwarven brunch. Morning arrived with a warm glow streaming through the windows of the tavern. As the trio made their way downstairs, they were greeted by a delightful surprise. Mira had set out a grand dwarven brunch for them, a feast that included roasted meats, fresh bread, cheeses, and hearty stews. "Morning, lads," Mira called out cheerfully, gesturing to the spread. "Thought I'd treat you, considering how generous you've been with your tips lately." Thorn's eyes lit up at the sight of the food. "Wow, Mira, this looks amazing." He wasted no time grabbing a plate and piling it high with food. Riker chuckled as he joined Thorn at the table. "This is quite the spread. Thank you, Mira." Garfa nodded his appreciation. "Indeed, it's a welcome sight after everything we've been through." They ate heartily, enjoying the meal and taking a moment to relax. The warmth of the tavern, the delicious food, and the camaraderie helped lift their spirits, if only for a little while. Shopping in Shadybrook. Once they had finished their meal, the trio decided to stock up on supplies before continuing their investigation. They headed out to the Greenthorn Apothecary, where they met Fiona Greenthorn, the town's herbalist. "Good morning, gentlemen." Fiona greeted them warmly. "How can I assist you today?" Garfa stepped forward. "We're in need of health potions, preferably as many as you have available." Fiona nodded and gathered several vials from her shelves, each filled with a shimmering red liquid. "These should do the trick. They're potent enough to get you back on your feet if you find yourselves in trouble." After purchasing the potions, the group made their way to the blacksmith forge, where Ulrich von Spielberg and his apprentice, Bran Eldridge, were hard at work. The clanging of metal and the roar of the forge filled the air as they approached. Thorn eyed the various weapons on display, but after a thorough search, the group found nothing that suited their needs. Riker examined a few pieces of armor but ultimately decided that his current gear was sufficient. "Seems like we're well equipped for now," Garfa said, turning to Thorn and Riker. "Perhaps it's time we delve deeper into what's been happening in town." To the manor. Thorn, ever curious, suggested they return to Julius von Winkle's manor. "We never got a chance to look through the archives there. Maybe there's something that can tell us more about what Julius discovered." Riker and Garfa agreed, and the trio made their way back to the Grand Manor. Inside, the air was heavy with an eerie stillness. They moved to the study, where the archives were stored. Rows of books, scrolls, and old tomes lined the shelves. As they began their search, Riker discovered a dusty old tome detailing the history of the Amulet of Light. The amulet was an artifact created by the Order of Light, a powerful relic that had protected Shadybrook from dark forces for generations. Its power was said to be derived from the blessings of the gods themselves, particularly Aurelia, the goddess of light and purity. This must be what Julius was investigating, Riker said, showing the tome to Garfa and Thorn. The Amulet of Light, it's powerful enough that someone like Malaka would want to get his hands on it. Garfa's expression darkened. If that's true, then we need to ensure it's still safe. I'm heading to the Temple of Light. I need to see if Father Arik knows anything about this. Without waiting for a response, Garfa left the manor, his steps urgent as he made his way to the temple. Thorn, not wanting to be left behind, quickly followed after him. Riker's discovery. Riker, however, stayed behind, intrigued by what else the archives might hold. He continued to search, and soon came across more information, details about Dismera, the goddess of shadows and forbidden magic, and the ancient shadow war that had ravaged Valoria centuries ago. The Order of Light had stood against Dismera, ultimately banishing her and sealing her influence away with the help of the Amulet of Light. Riker's eyes widened as he read. So this is what we're dealing with, Dismera's influence returning, and the amulet being the key to keeping her at bay. Satisfied that he had gathered enough information, Riker hurried to catch up with Garfa and Thorn at the temple. The Temple of Light. At the Temple of Light, Garfa and Thorn were speaking with Father Arik. The priest's face was lined with worry as Garfa explained what they had discovered. When Riker arrived, Father Arik led them to a small, locked room in the back of the temple. As he opened the door, the trio saw an empty pedestal. The Amulet of Light was gone. No, Father Arik whispered, his voice filled with dismay. The Amulet of Light must have been stolen. Without it, our defenses against Dismera's darkness are severely weakened. Thorn frowned, the gravity of the situation dawning on him. So someone took it. Maybe Malaka wants it? Garfa clenched his fists, his determination evident. We need to find it before it's too late. Father Arik thought for a moment, then turned to the adventurers. There is one place I suspect the amulet might be, a hidden passage beneath the town, connected to the old sewers. The Shadow Syndicate was once known to operate there, and it could be that they are involved in this. Riker nodded, his tail flicking with agitation. Then we go into the sewers. If the Shadow Syndicate is holding the amulet, we'll get it back. Father Arik placed a hand on Rikar's shoulder. Be careful, the darkness below is thick, and I fear you may encounter far worse than Syndicate members. May Aurelia's light guide you. With their next destination set, the trio left the temple, their resolve stronger than ever. They had a lead, a partial map that pointed them to the sewers outside of town. They knew the path ahead would be dangerous, but the fate of Shadybrook, and possibly all of Valoria, rested on their shoulders. The shadows grew deeper as they made their way to the entrance of the old sewers, an iron grate, rusted and partially obscured by overgrown ivy. Determined to retrieve the Amulet of Light and stop whatever dark plans Malaka had in store, they steeled themselves for the dangers that awaited them below.